Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion, media, virtual production. Any questions you have around that, it's a good time to ask them. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, Richard Lavery is going to be talking about ZoomISO and its deployment at an academic conference. And so it's Richard's put together a pretty good presentation before, so the pressure's on. Let's see what Richard's got to show us. Tomorrow we're going to talk about trouble sound. So what are the most common things we run into when we're working with sound, and how do we try to resolve them? How do you find the basis of that problem? In our kind of process related to looking for Office Hours 2.0 and graphics, we're going to take a look at sweepers on Wednesday. So taking a look at how they're constructed and look at different uses of them and just really take notes from some of the broadcasters that already do them. Friday, we're going to have the folks from Universe come and join us. Universe is it's an automation tool I don't even call it an automation tool, but really a very powerful tool that ties into hardware protocols as well as software protocols. And I think you're going to be interested in it. We're using it for Office Hours 2.0. It's kind of talking to Isadora and building the front end. And so anyway, they're going to come on and answer your questions about the product. Of course, Saturday is the education hour. We don't broadcast that. And at 10 o'clock, Damayanti Gajar is back, and we'll be cooking with her. And then at noon, the Belfast method at Todd Reynolds' house. So that'll be coming on Saturday. So a busy week as always. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Liberty, can you jump into the first question?
Yes, David Paskin in Miami, Florida asks, looking for the best USB mic for tech challenge speakers or talent to improve their audio quality.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I really do like the Apogee. The Apogee mic is 24-bit, 96 kilohertz, and all you have to do is just plug it into USB, and it's class compliant, so you don't have to worry about drivers or things like that. And it has a headphone jack right on the microphone, so you can plug in your headphone right into the microphone and hear yourself.
John?
So for tech challenge people, the Audio-Technica line, the AT line 2100, this 2005. The nice thing about this unit is it's got both USB and XLR on it, so they can kind of grow into this. They can start off at USB, and if they want to add a interface or a mixer later, they can upgrade it. And it's got pretty decent sound quality. It's okay.
Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I'm quite a fan of the Rode Podcaster, which is this one I'm using here. It's pretty plug and play and works, and it's very similar to the XLR version, which is the Procaster, if you fancy switching up eventually to a XLR model.
And Mickey?
I'm a big fan of the Shure MV7. It has both USB and XLR, similar to John's recommendation, so you can utilize it in more professional workflows in the future. And it's also very easy to use and sounds great.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of getting one with USB and XLR, just so that you know that you'll be able to keep on putting into any pipeline down the road. Next question.
Vienna Tran from Australia asks, what are the panelists' suggestions for keeping AV equipment, especially cables, away from house pets?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, there's two solutions. One is a toolbox that you can put the cables into. Preferably one that a cat can't open. And trust me,
I thought you were using a toolbox that you put your pet into.
No, because the pet will escape the toolbox. The cables have got to go. The other suggestion is, depending on the pet's limb type, train the pet to wrap the cables for you at the end of a gig.
There you go. Go ahead, John Preto.
Whatever you do, don't get a bird. My bird eats all of my cables and my Raspberry Pis. I'm on my 4th Raspberry Pi now. Eats the keyboards.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think that for me, the big one is a door. It's just keeping the door shut to the offices and keeping everything kind of encased into it is the biggest the piece of it. I had a cat get in the other day. I think you guys saw the cat jump up and hang out with me a little bit, and she almost turned off half my office. So she was running around. She gets so excited if she gets into my office. She's like, look at all this stuff. I can't believe it. I haven't seen any of this stuff. I got to sniff it. I got to jump over top of it. I got to attack this power cable. And I was like, cat's not going to last very long, or I'm not going to last very long. All right, next. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, some people use a citrus spray, and some of the pets don't like the citrus smell, and they stay away from it. So you might give that a try.
Yeah. Next question.
Jasmine Lee in Singapore asks, by no choice of yours, your presenter who uses Zoom all the time is unable to join an event's Zoom meeting link within 15 minutes to show. What are the first 3 questions you would ask to troubleshoot?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would first ask, what email address is your Zoom ID that you're currently logged into link to? Second, I would say, please check your email. I have sent the link once again. And third, I would ask, is there anyone else that could possibly assist at your location?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing that causes people not to be able to get into a session is whether they're logged into Zoom. Like that tends to be they're not logged in whatever browser they went through, and so they don't pick up the key on the way through. So I think that is the one that we see the most often. Go ahead, Chris.
One of our clients just merged with another big company, and that company has historically not allowed Zoom. So we're seeing more and more people logging in, allowed it to be installed on their machine. So we're seeing more and more people logging in through the browser, and it's frustrating because the browser is not as good, but sometimes it works okay, and so it's really hard to draw a line in the sand.
For people, we don't even like when people watch stuff on the browser on Zoom, but we definitely push back really hard on people using the browser as a participant. I mean, like as a speaking participant. That's really
it's
a mess.
odd. One of the producers that we've been working with, she goes, "Oh, I've been using the browser all the time." I'm like, "Really?
Yeah.
Wow." It's weird.
I don't think these cars need tires at all. I think they just run they just run right down. It's just fine. All right, next question.
David Paskin in Miami, Florida asks, produce an event this weekend, and after asking and suggesting multiple times that presenters be on Ethernet and use headphones, very few did, and it affected the quality. How do you sleep at night after an experience like that?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Soundly. I put my head on the pillow and I go to sleep. If they're not willing to listen to the instructions and do things at a high standard, everybody else who is seeing it, everybody whose own image is of a high standard will notice and just simply won't regard that person as professional anymore.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I'd echo what Stuart says. Running webcasts, it's quite often that you tell people that they need to do things to improve their quality, and they don't. And at the end of the day, it's on them.
Yeah. One of the things that I tell people a lot when I'm prepping them is, we sent out a kit and we're working with everybody else, and they're going to have all of this stuff connected, and it's a little bit of the cops going, I'm gonna go talk to your friend. And if your friend doesn't have the same story, it's my version of it is, I'm gonna equip your friend with what he needs, and you might want to. I just want to make sure that you look as good as everybody else. That soft area tends to work pretty well. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly. As Stuart mentioned, like you've done your job, and knowing that you've done it to the best of your abilities, like you should be able to sleep soundly with that, and hope that people learn from the experience and just think of the paycheck that's coming.
Courtney.
Yeah, here's how you sleep at night. You fire up the Disney Frozen DVD and you listen to Let It Go over and over again about 3 times until the earworm sticks in your head. And you follow the instructions of Let It Go, and you eventually fall to sleep. Or the other thing you could do is send them a video copy of them versus somebody who is following the instructions so they can hear how they sound compared to everybody else.
I think that Jeff Francis, I think he actually used me as an example when I left my Wi-Fi on, but he has a great video of showing, like, this is what it looks like and this is what happens to you when you're on Wi-Fi. And I think that that's a great thing to, what we should do is build a more generalized video that is with Wi-Fi, without Wi-Fi, put it on YouTube, and then that's what we all refer to. Like this is what it's like, and this is So let's think about that. We need to build.
Exactly what I was going to say, Alex. I think that what we could do is some afternoon on after hours, we could set up all the worst case scenarios, put put a bunch of people on live speakers with built-in microphones,
Mm-hmm.
have them have a standard conversation, and then start
But I think we put them as separate. I think we do one at a time. Oh, you're right. One at a time.
Start adding one element at a time. So now we're going to put people on a better microphone. Now we're going to turn off their speakers, and now we're going to take them off of Wi-Fi, and have little check boxes on the side. This is when you do these things. This is when you do these things, and kind of have a standard conversation that goes back and forth. And we can kind of tweak it to make it look even worse, which is what good demo material is. It's
exactly.
to look bad.
Mitchell?
Hey, the last thoughts that go through my head as I put my head on the pillow is you're only as good as the last job you did. And irregardless of what you did to prepare for that disaster, if it happened, is that I wish I could hear the conversation that the client is having with the producer or whoever, how they're pointing a finger at me, because inevitably somebody's going to get the finger pointed at, and it's usually not them.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
It just dawned on me that most people don't watch office hours. They don't know what good audio and video sounds and looks like. And so they, when I say to them, you'll sound so much better, you'll look so much better, I don't even think they have anything to compare the normal terrible Zoom experience to.
Right. Yeah, because all of their Zoom experiences are terrible. like I mean that's the reality. It's kind of like you've only it's like walking up to someone who's only ever had McDonald's, and there's this thing called a filet mignon. It is amazing. It's almost the same price. And so it's really good. So yeah, I think that is one of the problems, is that people don't know that the state of people's participation in most things online, is pretty low. But what happens is, and I feel like that's part of why I created Office Hours, was that I wanted to make sure that we were all kind of, upping our game together. I mean, I think that everyone here makes me up my game. I can't go to a hotel without bringing a whole kit. And it's not as good as what I have at home, but it's better than most hotels. So but I think that is, really, really incumbent. And as we push it forward, as you see all of us pushing that out into the world, if you look at YouTube or TikTok, a lot of those things were really rough in the early days. They were just, barely working. But what happens is everyone starts playing harder. And when they see other people up their game, they see the gap, between them and that other person. So, I mean, I get a comment about my setup at home at least once a day, from clients. That's I would really like to have that mic, or I'd really, that lighting looks really good, or, and it really makes a huge difference. And so all we can do is just keep trying to push it down the path. Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Yeah, I actually wrote a blog last year sometime. It's called Why Do I Do This? And I carried all the equipment to my apartment that I worked over the weekend. I carried almost everything. And I just wrote, why do I do this? And the moral of it was, look good, sound good, wherever you are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a great video. I don't know where to find it, but I know it's on YouTube somewhere, where they talk about if a phone conference was in person, and they have these people like, I can't hear you, and some people like coming out, and someone's sitting there with a dog, and it's really well done. You should search for it. It's a cool video. All right, next question.
Our next question comes from David Paskin in Miami, Florida. David asks, in an office setting where I have no control over the Ethernet coming into the building, what are the best ways to optimize and get the best internet speeds?
Go ahead, Mickey.
So I would get in touch with the people that do have control, so the IT department of that office, and work with them with getting the connectivity needs that you need set up.
And David, is this something where you're going regularly, or is it just when you walk into a random place and hit Ethernet?
No, this is my regular office.
Yeah. The first thing to do is, are you getting bad speed tests, or are you?
No, I'm just always wanting to optimize and make it as good as it can be.
I have to admit, almost the very first thing I do when I plug an Ethernet in is I just go to speedtest.net and I hit it, and I'm looking at my ping and my up and down. It's just kind of one of those. And we used to, a lot of times for when we're building shows and we send people out, that's the first thing they do. They send it back to us. So I get an email of someone, and that's part of, hey, I'm loading in, this is the speed, you know, and it's either really good or really bad, or, you know, and we keep track of the highest speeds. That for a long time, 942. 942 was the highest speed we saw. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker in Southend-on-Sea, UK. When switching audio inputs in Mac OS, Zoom OSC complains that the speaker's not working, even though it is. Does anyone else experience this, and what's the fix?
Go ahead, Husman.
There's actually no fix. I get it all the time, and I ignore it, and I close the window down. And most times it doesn't affect the actual meeting itself.
So just an errant. We believe it's an errant thing, but don't worry about it, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah,
Dennis?
Ignore it. It's not critical.
Has that been your experience, Dennis?
It switches absolutely fine, but the message still comes up. So
interesting. It's interesting. We'll have to keep looking at that. If only someone was here that is listening that would have something to do with OSC. I mean, Zoom OSC, that would help. So, all right, next question.
Our next question is from Nick Bate in UK. Teradisi or
it's Nick Bat.
Nick Bat, sorry, Nick. So Teradisi or Parsec for remote AWS vMix instance, and why?
Does anyone have a strong opinion? Usually some of our heavier AWS guys aren't here today. I think that a lot of folks have been leaning towards Parsec, you know, but I think Teradisi is a little bit easier to set up. I believe that, but you should probably, Nick, maybe ask again when you see who are the people really. We're going to have an AWS hour soon, another one where we do Q&A, so stay tuned for that. But I don't think we have our AWS. You just happen to get us on a day that our AWS guys aren't here. Next question.
William Colvin in Cushenden, North Ireland. Could the panel please discuss or advise on a decent pair of entry-level in-ear monitors? Thank you.
Go ahead, Jason.
Sennheiser has an excellent entry-level pair. I want to say they're $50 or $100. Also, the entry-level Shures are pretty stinking good.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, first of all, I know that Liberty definitely needs to tell us what she's using today, but I love these MEE. I have no idea if that's Me or MEE Audio M6 Pros. They're $50 and they're great.
Sorry, Alan?
And going back to what David just said, this is literally what's in my ear now, is what he was just talking about, the ME Audio M6s, and I think they're great. I also have the Shure, is it the SE 200 or 210s, and they're better, but only a little bit, and they're twice the price.
Nigel?
Yeah, for the first time today, I'm using the Lindsay KX Zax, which I know other people have recommended. And it's an interesting experience moving from a single in-ear system into the two. I'm hearing a lot more sounds.
Yeah. Liberty?
So this is a plug for after hours or before the show, because I've got the Shure 215s in, and I was trying to figure out how to put them in properly. So the whole panel was able to help me. So these are the Shure 215s.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I tried the Lindsay's as an in-ear for the show, and I heard so much that it was distracting. Like I just heard every little thing in my office, and I was like, oh no, that's what's going out to the on air. And so now I had to like rethink my office, and there was a whole bunch of existential processes that happened when I put those on, because they really pull out a lot. But they're good for $50 or $60. They're kind of amazing. Next question.
Our next question is Sam Greenwood in Toronto, and he asks, have any of you seen how impressively the new MacBook Pros have been reviewed? Do you think that there are novel uses considering the results these reviews have showed?
Go ahead, Jason.
The novel use case here is the ability to play back video for 21 hours. I mean, it's not new, but it's significant. That is a sea change, paradigm shift of difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is that I think it's what Apple's doing is almost impossible. Like what it's done is almost impossible, because it's just you have to control so many bits of the pipeline, and they're not done yet. When you see them say in the last quarterly, they said, we're being slowed down by legacy components. So they said, when someone uses the word legacy, it means that they're getting rid of them. So all the components, that are in the computers are eventually going to be something that they probably run. So I think that this is an evolution of what they're doing, and I think that the performance is pretty amazing. So I think we're going to continue to see that over the next couple of years as they kind of sink into that process. Next question.
Our next question is from Nick again in the UK. Are the new 1080 webcams on the M1 Pro MacBooks or iMacs good enough quality for office hour panelists?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, I don't think any of us have seen them yet. I mean, at the end of the day, with good lighting, any 1080p webcam should work. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex.
Yeah, no, I think at 1080p, I think that they're probably good enough with good lighting. And really, almost any 1080p is good with good lighting. Not all of them, but strong lighting. What it does is one of the things you'll notice is if you move back and forth, you'll always see anytime I put on a new webcam, you'll see me go like this, and I just bounce back and forth like this because what I'm looking for is the motion blur. And if it's really blurry, it means it's running at a slow frame rate. It may be saying it's doing 30 frames a second, but what it's actually doing is sampling at a lower. The shutter speed is slowing down because the chip is not sensitive enough for even normal use. And so when people look blurry when they're moving around, it means the chip is not very sensitive, and how it makes that work is just, it stays open longer so that it can. So it might be sampling 30 frames a second, but the shutter is much slower, and that creates that large motion blur that we see. And so I think that I know that the 1080p camera on the iPad is definitely good enough. So I think that if they're using the same thing or similar, I think you're probably going to be in good shape. But what will make the difference is as Jason said, the quality of your light. Next question.
Our next question is from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Any new learnings to report from this weekend's Belfast method?
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting, exciting kind of one this week because we finally got a team dedicated just to the audio. So I had our in-building sound engineer, Martin, just kind of take an overview and allow then Mickey and Douglas and Marty Attias to control everything from the sound check through. Maybe Mickey can attest or can talk a bit more about that side of things from how that was for him. But it was really lovely to start to get kind of two separate teams starting to work almost independently of one another to start to increase the quality. And it really feels like we're moving forward quite quickly with increasing the kind of the scope that remote control can do. It's been really lovely.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, on that front, it was nice to have Martin Price, Accidental Theater's engineer, have a bit more of a relaxing day as opposed to the previous Belfast experiments wherein he was like running around and doing so many things at the same time. He was for last Saturday, he was mainly handling the actual physical miking and setting up, and of course interacting with the talents directly. And Douglas and Marty took care of the mixing, and I was mostly doing more of the utilitarian tasks of switching between the two studios and taking care of dialing and sync and stuff like that. In terms of what we learned, going back to dialing sync, it's nice to be able to offload the more utilitarian delay stuff, like matching audio signals to camera feeds on a separate piece of hardware instead of having to do it on the actual board that you're doing the mixing on, because it just takes up, it takes up buses, it takes up effects racks. Last Saturday, we did all the delays in the X32 rack that was acting as a stage box as opposed to the board that was doing the mixing. So that freed up a bit more, gave us a bit more, flexibility in terms of what you can do creatively. Yeah.
You know, I really think that people, for people watching, you really want to find a way to participate, with these tests, with Tony's tests, with the Belfast method. I think we're gonna get Husmuk into the mix here and start taking over for the cooking. So I think we're gonna start applying that. So keep your eye out for that. They're incredible opportunities to learn, not just how to do something no one's ever done before, which is enough in itself. We're doing that. Other people have done it, but we are this interactive, people coming in from all over the world, figuring it all out and figuring it out together, and then learning from each other. Everybody, I'm sure, is learning things just from each other and from the process. If you have the time, definitely take a look at that, because it's a really powerful opportunity. Next question.
Our next question is from Jasmine Lee in Singapore. In a hybrid event, what are the best camera angles to capture a 4-speaker panel discussion with both on-site and remote speakers that will look good for the digital audience? Should all the speakers appear as talking heads?
Go ahead, Stuart.
There's 2 simple ways of doing this. One is a small camera that sits on the desk in front of them, giving them this sort of framing. Unfortunately, that will have it looking up their nose. If you lift the camera, you block the people in the audience from being able to see. So you put the camera at the back of the audience with a long lens and try to line them up so you get as close to this sort of view as possible. The third option for anybody who walks around is a snorri cam, and you should look up that one.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends. It depends on how big the audience is. If it's a hybrid event with a live audience, it depends on the number of cameras that you have to cover the event, and it depends on how you want to have the speakers on the panel interact with the remote panelists. My best bet would be to put them on a stage in a semicircle, not a full circle, an arc really, so that the outside members of the 4 people in the panel can see the faces of the other people on the panel. Then put your cameras out. You can put if you have operated cameras. That's another variable is whether you have camera operators or if you've got fixed cameras. Put a 55-inch monitor or something out amongst the audience with the cameras over the top of them so it can shoot the panelists, and also put the remote panelists on the monitor so that they can look out at the camera and see the remote people. And then for the people if there's actual audience members in this hybrid event, you're going to have an IMAG screen or somewhere off to the side of the panelists, not in back of them, because that will be distracting, that has the remote panelists coming in on the larger monitors that are either over the shoulder of the other panelists.
Go ahead, Richard.
I think the talking head view for hybrid events is pretty difficult to achieve. I would almost go as far as virtually impossible for on-stage talent, because they'll look at each other. So they'll start to look off to the side, they'll look around them, they'll look at the audience around, and your framing shot will immediately have to change and adapt, which is very, very hard to do. You're kind of immediately going to have to go to a stage view with a slightly wider shots that allow for the person to look away to the side. Using kind of techniques from other industries, about the kind of 180-degree rule, where you're shooting from angles to the side. So whenever a talent is looking at the audience, you have a front-on shot, but also you have side shots wherever they're looking at a different person beside them. You can get front on. Usually helps kind of make it a little bit more seamless, but it's really hard to join those 2 worlds. You're kind of going back to more of a panel shooting the entire stage view. Yeah,
so I'll show you a picture of what we did long ago. This is the first one that we took this pathway for a hybrid event. So on those screens, and I think there were either 2 or 3 of those, or 3 of those screens, I think, that were there. We put the folks, in this case, a Hangout, but it could have been Zoom, it could have been something else. And then we pulled everybody into a circle. So the speakers are actually in a circle. It does mean that some people are looking at the backs of some of the speakers. But what it did is the speakers had a very comfortable conversation with that large air star that was above them. It gave them kind of I'm sorry, this light in the foreground. That was not part of it. That was just decoration. But the air star, which is the large circle, what it did is it provided this kind of living room light. And when the client asked us to do this, in this case, Virgin, we I did not like it at all. I was like, this is a horrible idea. You can't do this. You're going to see other cameras. You're going to see other things. You're not going to be able to control it. And I've come to think that this is the best. I've done now many events in either a full circle or a semicircle. And I think that this is the vastly superior version of this. The whole square that we used to do is problematic. Now, we've done a lot of iterations of this. This is just the photo I could find really quickly. But what it does by putting it in a circle is it pulls the entire audience really close. So nobody, this is 150 or 200 people, and nobody was more than about 25 feet from the speakers. Like we had amplification, but we barely needed it, in the room because everyone's really close. Now, other versions of this that we've done is bleachers that go up, because that really pulls you even closer to the people in front of you. So, and then from the camera angles, the background is actually people, which is quite nice. And especially a large aperture or large sensors, they're kind of soft behind them. And then you have the screens up a little higher in those cases. But it pulls the whole audience in. And then it also, and then the best way to do this, if you can, and you'll see us do it in the Final Cut user group, Final Cut virtual user group that's on the Pixel Core YouTube page. We learned very quickly that first one had 6 people, which is really difficult. If you have an odd number of speakers, you can shoot the gaps between them. So basically you shoot between every speaker and you're getting a head and shoulder of each person all the way around. That's almost perfect. They turn a little bit, but they're not turning these hard turns. And after doing after thinking that it was crazy, we locked into slowly. Anytime you came to us and asked us to design something for you, we put it in a circle. Like it was the way we would do hybrids. Now, did it really work for the online audience? I'm as you know, I'm not a huge fan of hybrid events, but it was the closest to that, because you got this really good view for the online audience. Now, one other thing that we bid on doing, but we didn't, but I think that we would do it if we did it again, is getting a car rotator and rotate. We were basically going to put a giant lazy Susan under the people and move them like a degree a second, or a degree a minute or something, where they're just slowly turning. Not so much that they'd feel it, but so much that that the audience would eventually, during a 1-hour discussion, get to see everybody. It does make the camera shots more complicated, so you can't rotate those. So anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, what do you do in the event that the venue doesn't accommodate audience in the round? If they've got a stage and fixed seats in an auditorium.
Yep. Well, when we do it, we usually have choice of the venue. So like literally, we just go in and go, this place won't work. Now for the most part, we don't work in. Most of the time when we've done events. We don't often go into a built-out theater. We go into a space that is, a hotel event space or a conference area. So usually those are just empty boxes. And so for our boxes, we're usually looking for a 50 by 50 foot square that's 12 feet high, minimum, and then we can kind of just build into that, to make that work. So but it is, once you do it, I know it sounds, what I'm saying, it sounds crazy, but I will tell you that once you do it and you feel the energy of everyone, in there, because it really feels like this giant huddle for the speaker. And once you do it once, you don't ever want to do anything else. Like it locked in, and we've worked with some very large companies to do this, and it's been really successful. Anyway, next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico asks, is there a link for today's OH 2.0 stream?
Andy just got there, and I think that he's watching how it's interacting. I don't think we're streaming it today, but we will be streaming it tomorrow. So we'll post that link into Mokana. So Andy just is observing right now and taking a look at it, but we'll have a link for you tomorrow. Next question.
Joseph LeBond in Greeley, Colorado. What are the recommendations for $200 or less USB cameras?
Go ahead, David.
So most people on the panel will recommend the Logitech Brio. I don't have one, but I've heard wonderful things about it. I would throw two other options into the conversation. One is the Elgato Facecam. The second, or the third rather, is the OBSBot. I have an OBSBot now. It's fantastic. All three of these are under $200. The OBSBot Tiny is actually coming out with a 4K version, and they claim their sensor is much bigger than the Logitech Brio. It's a Indiegogo, so we haven't had a chance to see it yet, but looks exciting. It's only $215 on Indiegogo now if you buy it early.
Go ahead, John.
Insider tip: yes, the Brio is the gold standard at $200. However, if you go to the Huddle Cam at $299, the nice thing about the Huddle Cam is it's got a remote control and it's got HDMI out. However, they've been selling this camera, and we've purchased several of these, and we're really happy with this Via camera. It's very, very close, or if not exactly the same as the Huddle Cam. Comes with a remote, and it's $169. That's a deal because you can plug it into an ATEM Mini as well.
Yeah, so far from a size perspective and cost perspective and quality perspective, we've probably bought 150 Brios in the last year. So, for what we're doing, and so and shipped, and for a while we're shipping them out of South Africa from our man in South Africa. So anyway, so we but the Brios so far have kind of checked the marks off. Well, the Huddle Cams are a little bit better. They're a little bit more expensive, and they're bigger, and so that becomes where everything makes a difference for us in that area. I am interested in the one that John was just showing, so I'll take a look at that as well. We did get the face cam. I got the face cam Elgato face cam and the Dell that came out, and I didn't find the sensors as good as the Brio. The Stream Cam is also another one that's a little less expensive than the Brio, but I would stick with the Brio over the Stream Cam, which is also made by Logitech. The Dell, I will say, I didn't send it back because the industrial design on the Dell camera on the exterior is the best I've ever seen in a camera. I just need to have it there just to show people how amazingly they figured out how to do it. And the only thing they didn't design well is the sensor. Turns out with a web camera, sensor is important. But so if they improved the sensor, I would have jumped to the Dell in 10 seconds. Next question.
The next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Ken and I talked in detail about the growth of remote production and remote work. For remote opportunities in our industry, would most of them come from within our community?
I don't know if most of them in a general sense. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out a lot of these things and how all of this stuff is going to piece together. But I think that this is going to be one of the better places to get those opportunities, because you get that slow opportunity, which is that there are things like the Belfast method and the Mobley process and all these things, and Office Hours 2.0, that you're given the opportunity to experiment with other folks and to have hopefully small failures. But the hardest part of getting into an industry, if you're not in school, is how do you get that first job, and how do you get the experience that you need to be effective without getting fired. So I think that there's it's really, really hard to get into, and we're going to keep on creating more and more of these opportunities. As I said, Hosmuc, we're going to start taking over his system soon. And so we're going to keep on having these shows going, and I think we'll end up with, and then I think that also the Hour of Happy is also having, pulling people in as well. So there's 3 or 4 that are going on each week, and I think we're going to keep on increasing that because we want to give people that opportunity to figure out what it looks like. And we're all learning from each other. Everyone's got their own view, and we're in this place where we usually don't get this. I mean, one of the things that was the most useful about what I did is that, Google and Facebook mostly would just send me to somewhere, and sometimes they were broadcasters, sometimes they were event companies, and my job was to tie all this stuff in. So I got to work with lots of different teams, and they all have funky ways of doing things. And some of them are really good ideas, and some of them are bad ideas. And I would take pictures like, oh, I'm going to make a case like this, or I'm going to do this, and I would learn from all these different groups. We get to do that virtually, where we have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different backgrounds, and we get to constantly cross-pollinate that knowledge in a way that in the industry you don't get to do very often. And so I think that this would be the best place to keep working on that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Alex. It for me, it was sort of an outgrowth of seeing the phenomenon of Zoom during pandemic world and how people were embracing that type of communication. And when I built my room, I built it to take it a step further than just what was out there, and I'm sure it's going to go many steps beyond what this is. But I like what I see, and I'm so intrigued with the things that are happening on office hours that I'm soaking it all up like a sponge.
Very good. Next question.
Our next question comes from Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. What are your favorite and most comfortable IEMs?
Go ahead, Hasmukh.
Well, many moons ago, last year, August, when we were all trying to look good and sound good as newbies in office hours. And I know, Alex, you mentioned Ear Hero quite often at that time. And Mickey just very casually dropped, Bubble Bee Psychic is a good set of ears. And I have a lot of respect for Mickey, so I just bought one. So I have nothing to compare with, but I believe they're the most comfortable in-ear monitors I have ever had.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah, for critical listening work though, I'm a big fan. I have the Shure SE425 and SE535, and they have taken a beating over the past couple of years, and they still work great. They have to replace cables every now and then, but that's to be expected with something that you literally run with.
Yeah, I when I really need high quality, I usually move to over the ear. So if I need something that I'm going to critically listen to, usually I switch into an over the ear. For in-ear monitors for stuff like this show, I will say that the Bumblebees are the most comfortable, and I think I've owned, I don't know, five or six different in-ear monitors, and they're incredible. Like they're just incredibly comfortable, and the sound resolution is better than everything else as well. They were kindly donated to me, so I wasn't, and so anyway, so I enjoy them a lot. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California. We all love those powerful magnets. How do you use them in tech and media creation?
Go ahead, Jason.
In my new studio, I have a whole bunch of mason jars, and I've put magnets on both the lid and a whole series of overhead shelves. So for the little things that I can't put on a pegboard, I'll put them in the mason jar, label the mason jar, and then just stick it right up on the shelf. Very, very handy.
Stuart?
I use them to stop the heads crashing into the platters in hard drives because that's what they were designed for.
Stop
One clue, do not put them either side of the webbing on your fingers. People have done that and you can't get them off easily.
I was trying to find really quickly here. I don't know if I'll be able to pull it off, but so one of the things that I use them for is the really powerful ones. I mean, these are ones that you get warnings. I buy ones that they give you warnings of not to, like, to be careful what's between them when they're apart, or don't let them actually touch each other because you'll never get them to pull apart again. So those are kind of the ones that I hit. And I'm going to see if I can find a photo for you, but I build whole sets with it. So one of the things that if I can find the photo, what we do is we actually build an ectoskeleton for the sets, and that ectoskeleton is a here we go. This is, I might be able to do this really nicely. This might actually work.
Does that ectoskeleton use
it's not really yeah, exactly. So here is a set, right? So this is all built with 80/20. So you can see, I don't know what that was for. So these pieces that are put onto that set, those are put on by magnets. So you can see the magnets here. So these are those some of the high powered magnets. Those are smaller ones, but there you go. How convenient that I shot that. So this is all of the stuff slides in and snaps into the and the advantage of that is you can tear this whole set apart in a couple hours. So you have something that looks very physical. You can see those are the little pieces here, and so these are all set, here. But the shelving just pulls out, as does the window, but that's what So you have this set, and then this was open where to this 80/20 we could attach a monitor, to it. Now the advantage of all that, this is that's CBS. Anyway, so but the advantage of this is that you could build something that you could build a set, and the hard part is all done outside. The hard part is all done in the 80/20. So all your structure sits in the 80/20, and then you just take a set and you snap it to it. It literally snaps on. And when you want to change it, you snap it off, and you can take those flat pieces and store them somewhere, and so that you can have multiple ones. And the reason we built those was so that we could change the set every day. So you could have one look, and then you could have an entirely new look the next day. And then we actually started putting magnets behind the open boards. And so you had a series of magnets that we ended up just putting a plate behind the boards. That gave us more creativity. And so you had a metal plate on the other side of the board, and you put a magnet on things like pictures and stuff like that, and you just snap them onto the wall. So there's no nails. You just went click, and it would just stay. And so you could put together a complex set, and then be able to make all those changes to them relatively easily. And it's I don't know if I would do it a very large one in California with earthquakes, but in Washington, D.C., it worked really, really well. And but it let you make a lot of changes and very, very, very fast. Next question.
Our next question is from Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, Louisiana. I'm setting up my daughter-in-law's yoga studio so she can do online classes. What wireless mic and earphone do you recommend? She will be using a 2018 MacBook Pro in a 200 square foot room.
Go ahead, David.
So I'm a big fan of the Rode Go 2. For $300, you get 2 transmitters and 1 receiver. So that way, if she's leading a class and perhaps there's a guest leader also, you can actually mic both of them up, and that'll bring them both into the broadcast.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, on the lower end, the wireless Go 2 will certainly get the job done. If you want to step up a bit and get a bit more stability with your wireless transmission, I would step up to the Sennheiser G4s. Although I would always not use the built-in microphone of the wireless Go. You'd want to protect that transmitter from sweat. So you'd want to either wrap it with a latex glove or a non-lubricated condom and put it in a waist strap. I like the ones from Ursa straps, because sweat will kill electronics. It's salt water, essentially. I would go with a headset mic, because the movement of when you're doing yoga may cause a lot of cloth rubbing on lavaliers. Though if you want a cleaner look, you can certainly go with lavaliers, but make sure that you do a lot of testing or have someone who's constantly monitoring the feed to let you know if there's some rustle going on in the audio. And the same thing with the InEar monitors as well. You could use a wireless ghost. People have been doing that with success from what I know. But if you want to step it up, you can go with the 300 series Sennheiser IEM systems.
And my sister-in-law is actually a yoga teacher, so and she does her yoga online, and she uses the Rode Go's with the original ones because she bought them quite some time ago, along with a Samson mic that goes into them, and I think she's been using them for over a year very happily. So it's worked out really well. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia asks, free media share. I spent some time earlier in the week at a local waterfall, so the share folder over at mega.nz will have a 10-minute sound file of water rushing over the top.
Excellent. Where are you posting that link, Stuart?
That'll go in the same mega folder as I shared some vision, which is linked in Discord, so everyone can see it. And that's the waterfall as it was the other day.
Very nice. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Does anyone have a recommendation for an external Wi-Fi adapter for Mac looking at mobile bonding?
Go ahead, Jason.
I wanted to kind of draw a distinction here. So Wi-Fi is not the same as mobile, like you would be mobile bonding a wireless, series of cellular connections. Get with me later on Discord and I can help you sort that out. But for the most part, anything that's class compliant with really big antennas will work pretty well for Wi-Fi.
Next question.
Tim Home in San Lorenzo, California. I'm looking for AA rechargeable battery solution for wireless mics, mostly Sennheiser G4s. Is there a charging solution for 32 to 64 batteries? Will the NIMH work at 1.2 volts, or do I need lithium because of 1.5 volts, of the 1.5 volts they offer? Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Jason.
NIMH is nickel metal hydride, and yeah, it could work. So here's my InEar monitor, and Eneloop is pretty much the industry standard. Any high-end transceiver is going to actually allow you to set, you can set whether you're using nickel metal hydride or alkaline or rechargeable alkaline. So it actually doesn't really matter as much as you think. But as far as a battery, I like the Eneloops.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, with a lot of transmitters and wireless kits, they'll work down to 0.9 volts. So running nickel metal hydride batteries are okay, and lithium batteries that are in the AA form factor are quite they're not quite as mature in the industry. So like the sizes of the actual the physical sizes of the batteries vary, and they often get stuck in pieces of hardware. In terms of the charger, I'm a big fan of the NTP, I believe is the brand. I'll put a link in Mukana. They have AA chargers that have 8, 16, and 24 charging bays for AA's. I have a bunch of the 16 bay ones, and they've been pretty rock solid. They do cycle charging. They do. They're able to analyze batteries in terms of if they're still reliable. They're pretty good chargers.
Courtney?
Yeah, Mickey said most of the stuff, and most of the ones you can buy Eneloops, they usually come with a 4 battery charger, 4 or 8, and those work great. And the other thing about nickel metal hydride, there are not as many restrictions on traveling with those. So if you have lithium ion batteries, there are restrictions on traveling and storing loose batteries. So they might be a little better if you're going to be moving around to different locations via air travel.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I recall the charger now. ISDT is the brand, and the model is the N24. That's the 24 bay charger.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, what are some useful techniques when mixing live remotely without faders? I could see the use of DCAs along with ganging similar channels like guitar, mic /DI as useful tools.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I think in terms of mixing live on a soft piece of software as opposed to with physical faders, it's you really need to get familiar with the software, where everything is, how to quickly get to your dynamics, to your EQ. I think that's primarily it, because you can't move nearly as fast compared to having the physical faders right in front of you. So familiarize yourself with the software and practice.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, could the principles and technologies used in OH 2.0 be useful for other types of content like House of Worship productions?
Yeah, I think what we're doing in Office Hours 2.0 could be used in many, many different ways. So I think that we're going to figure it out, and it's we're just kind of cutting our teeth on that process right now. So it'll be a couple months of us figuring that out. But I think as we develop that, I think we're going to be in a really interesting position to produce some pretty incredible results that are very interactive. And what we're really working on is how do we make something that looks like a broadcast. The game is, how do we have it set up so that the participants, other than working on the quality of their cameras and audio, don't have to have any added complexity. They're just joining Zoom. So how do we have something be something relatively easy for them to join? But how do we on the back end then have it look as close to a broadcast as we can, but also reduce the complexity so that almost anybody can run it with a little bit of training? And that's the thing that we're going to keep working on, is to abstract all the complexity or much of the complexity out of it. It is not about doing it automatically. I'm a strong proponent for, I'd like to put people in places, because that's how shows really work, you know, and how they flow. But I think that we want the interfaces to really constantly be looking for ways to simplify the experience for the operator, so that they can worry about the creative of producing a great show, having a lot of things, you know, handed to them as they need it, and then tying that tightly in with all the question and answer and so on and so forth. And so, you know, we're going to keep on showing everybody what we're doing. You know, we're hoping that we can keep pushing it down the path. And a year from now, 2 years from now, I think that this will all be packaged up in AWS. You know, it's going to be, and you kind of log in, and then people just join, and you're just, and people just can take over, and you can. And the idea is that you can expand it out to as many people as you need to, or as many people as you have. You can expand the responsibilities out. The graphics and all the other bits and pieces can expand out. Or you can say, I want to run a show, and I just hit go, and it just does something automatically that is better than a standard Zoom, but you know, but it can run on its own, you know, run on its own. And as you add more people, it has more power, you know, and it looks better. But it can go everything from 0 operators all the way up to maybe 30 or 40 to make a great show. That's the goal. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia says, DJI Action 2 leaks. Thoughts on this tiny cube camera with its 0.6-inch sensor?
Go ahead, Alan.
I think it was pretty good. I had the original one, and I was a big fan of that. I had, you know, I moved over from the GoPros to it. It does look like they're copying the Insta360 design, which I don't think was particularly unique to them either. I think it comes down to about a week or so I'm definitely going to be having a look at that, because my wife has just stolen my old version of it, so I'm looking for an upgrade as well.
Courtney?
Yeah, I've been looking at the specs on it. It looks pretty interesting. It's pretty tiny. The only worry I have about it is this something about magnet. It does slow motion, it does time lapse, it does digital zoom. It's electronic image stabilization that also handles rotation, which is unusual for image stabilization. And it records 4K up to 120 frames per second, 155 degree wide field of view. The only weird thing is it has this magnetic, I think that's a magnetic screen or something that locks on the bottom of it.
I think it's a power module.
Is that the power module? They say something about also a magnetic touchscreen or something, but I'd worried about
There's a touchscreen, a power module, and some other stuff available for it.
Right.
I've got it.
So I'd be worried about attaching it with magnets to anything if it's an action camera, because they could become dislodged at the.
Yeah,
be unhappy.
The other thing to note is it is a 0.6-inch sensor, so that's that's bigger than half an inch. The actual numbers on their website are listed as 1/1.7 inches. That's huge for an action camera, to the point where for macro shots, there's actually another magnetic add-on that goes on the front of it. So you got an extra lens to do that. I'm looking forward to seeing what the color science is. And it's more like a GoPro that was cancelled that all the FPV people used to love. So it's ideal size to put on a drone.
Yeah, it's really, really, I mean, I think that DJI is one of those companies that's starting to just hit on all their cylinders, you know, where they're just, they've had all this dispersed technology, and now they're pulling it all in and really able to apply it. It's no longer just, they're not a one-trick pony, and they keep on like leveraging those things from different angles. It's quite a thing. All right, so we are going to change our direction, change our subject, and talk about ZoomISO and putting together a conference. And I'm going to hand it over. We're going to have Richard Lavery walk us through a project that he worked on there, and he's going to walk through it as you listen to it, ask questions, vote those questions up. So Richard's got a little bit to show us, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. So Richard, take it away.
Thanks very much, Alex. So I'm going to give you a bit of background on, first of all, kind of what the conference was and why did we choose ZoomISO to deploy for it. It's a mixture between an academic conference and a arts conference. So it was called the Dementia Fiction Festival, and it was the first time this conference has ever appeared. So originally it was meant to be a hybrid event, and then eventually with COVID, it was relatively recent. With COVID, they still wanted to keep it kind of online only. So it allowed us to originally have been set up to bring in remote guests, but also to have in-person presenters. So we ended up deploying something quite similar, but just without an audience, the audience being completely online. So the original brief was this. So it's a 2-day conference involving 12 separate presentations and panels. It would have a little bit more detail. It was going to run for pretty much the entire day. We have presenters coming in from across the world. We would have in-studio presenters. We would have a mix of kind of panelists with the 4 to 5 speakers. There'd be interaction between the online participants as well as the panelists. We as a venue, and this is one of the kind of first times we're starting to deploy managing both the ticketing, the tech, and then the ultimate delivery all together, which I think I'll talk about another day is the future of a venue. And then individual videos for each session would then be made available really quickly afterwards for people to watch. So what were the solutions we could do for this? So at the beginning, we could do just a standard Zoom webinar, as we're in right now. We could do a Zoom meeting. We could do Teams as well. Other online platforms are available. We could do screen scripts using kind of Wirecast. We could use multiple machines to pin, so a pin and spin, as I tend to refer to it, where we would just screen script off those machines into an item, or we could use something like ZoomISO. So obviously, I chose ZoomISO. The reasons for that is it allowed us to kind of build a really versatile, a really stable system. It was highly controllable. We could put it into our ATEM, as I'll kind of run through in a little bit. It was really stable, and it would be incredibly high quality. And then we could distribute it anywhere we wanted to as well, and we wouldn't need a computer per panelist. And it allows us also to have a backup if we wouldn't have 8 computers for panelists. We'd have to have 2 essentially for up to 8 panelists. And allows us to combine kind of different things, different in-studio and online guests. So how do we deploy it? So essentially, we have in our building a basement, and this is where I'm sitting at the moment. And in our basement, we converted it over the pandemic into 3 different areas: a Studio 1, a control room, and a Studio 2. And I'm sat in Studio 2. And for this conference, then we had presenters in Studio 1. We then had our whole team in the control room. And then we had another team member in the Studio 2. And that was used for participant prep. The kind of structure of the whole meeting meant that we would have one meeting where everyone was in it, and then inside that would be 2 breakout rooms. The breakout room 1 would be a preparation room, so guests would come in. We would then check their cameras, check their lighting, check their connection issues, check their connection if they were using slides, which is something that we would have a number of panelists do because it's academic. And then once we were ready, they would be moved into the live room, and the live room is where Zoom was. Where ZoomISO would be. So we had a Mac Mini running the overall meeting, and then our prep was done on an iMac, and then we had ZoomISO running off 2 minis in the control room. We also had a couple of days of prep beforehand with different panelists. We actually ran for an entire day. We ran a green room where they could come in at any time and check their setups and test things as much as we could do beforehand. But because it was quite a small conference, it wasn't always successful to get them to prep. And I'll show you an example of how that can go interestingly wrong later on. So this is how it fitted into the main system. So this is pretty much all the tech that we use to deploy it. Everything from the minis straight through to the big ATEM system, as well as then the console, the Behringer, and so forth. I'll make that a little bit bigger so if people can kind of have a look down it. The main kind of way we would do this is that ZoomISO would connect through from the minis via deck links and then run through into our big ATEM system. So that kind of looks something like that, along with audio. So I'll kind of take away the audio for 1 second just to focus upon the video. So we have here then 2 minis running 2 instances of ZoomISO with deck links. So we only had to take out 5 panelists max, but it meant that we could take out 4 from one system, 1 from the other, and then if we ever had a problem, we could actually move over to that the other mini as a backup if we had a problem with the first mini. We also had graphical playout coming from both an iMac Pro and then also a iMac 27-inch. The graphical playout sometimes would be the slides from the presentations. They would be controlled remotely from the academic, sometimes through Internet Clicker with PowerPoint, and then other times we would be playing videos directly into the stream. We would also have on a computer a system called Hovercast, if everyone's ever used it, which meant that we could send back questions to the remote guests just by the output feeds from those computers. So we would be able to send them back their presentations if they were doing it. We could also send them back the questions coming in from the online attendees. The audio system starts to look something like this. So Dante was used to connect everything together. So we had two Dante Avios, USB version coming from the two minis running into a Cisco switch. And then that would be running up to our main console upstairs. And then we would also have Dante DVS coming from the iMac Pro running into the system as well. This would all output to another Avio, the analog version, which would run into our audio delay box for kind of matching it up for the screen. So the Dante chain looks something like this, where we're going from the minis into the console, and then the console main out into the rain frame delay. That also involves then audio coming from the iMac Pro, and this was running our comms, the PowerPoint, and also video playout at different points. That would also run into the console, and then that would run also into Zoom. So we would be able to send that mix back to people, and also we would send that audio into the main console for going out. So we could send the sound back to the online attendees from the studio and then also be able to send it out to the main mix without comms, which is why there's a big X around it. So this is our control room. From one angle, this is Martin Price, as Mickey mentioned earlier on, who's operating right now. So this is our multi-view, and we have laid out here the presentation feed coming in, and then 5 Zooms, and then the graphical playout as well. So the kind of sea change for a lot of conferences is that we could then start to super source people together. We could start to add lower thirds on for people. At the end of the whole conference, like the people who were funding it, which is Queen's University in Belfast, as well as the organizers, were just astounded with the quality of the overall conference, because they've never seen anything kind of done with this way with ZoomISO before. So that's the kind of power of ZoomISO, being able to kind of allow us to do a lot of kind of production techniques, but apply it to a conference. Within this, you can kind of see that there's a double of one of the people coming in. So that's our backup running to make sure that we would have, if we ever have a problem with a failover of one of the presenters, we could easily move over to our other Mac Mini for backup. This is another shot of the control room, this time with me, and you can see kind of how it's laid out. We've got our backup ZoomISO, then we've got our main ZoomISO, then we've got our presentation computer, and then we've got our Studio One control. So that was Studio One, which is, as I showed earlier, is beside the control room, but I was able to dial into the computer that was running Studio One from another computer on the same network to be able to control what they're seeing in Studio One. And then we have our graphical playout. Plus I had some tea. So this is Studio One as it looked like. So we had an Ursa running into a web presenter, as well as a Mix Pre, as well as a Sennheiser mic, all running into another laptop, which then we connected to Zoom. So even the in-studio presenters were part on Zoom, and we were then taking that feed. We weren't directly getting the in-studio into the A10. We were actually just taking it off Zoom. I mean, there's a number of different reasons for that. Partially for this one, it's simplicity, to make sure that the conference wasn't huge. They had to do it on a quite tight budget, but also kept everyone in delay and in connection with each other. We also used 2 Astras to light it, which is controlled over NTEC, and the in-studio presenter had an iPad with Internet Clicker for whenever they had presentations. So that's a little video of what it actually looked like with our presenter in studio. Just a really simple black background to kind of isolate them, and then they had control of their slides. And this is kind of what it starts to look like. Very similar to what I'm looking like right now with the presenter as well as the slides, and we can then go full screen with them as we needed. So the preparation room looked something like this, which has the main meeting, which was running OBS. So OBS was just on those 2 computers for slides, so that we could give a little bit of just technical information to the people on the other end without turning on cameras and things like that. And that kind of starts to look like this as a whole setup with a bit of a mess with some cable gack everywhere. So we have the Mini, which is actually connected underneath the table, and then we have the iMac, and the people will come into the main meeting, and then our technician Emma would then move them into the preparation room, which is then where we would talk to them and then get them all set up and connected and so forth. She also has a computer for extra connection feeds to other parts of the system, including Hovercast for questions and answers and things like that. So the kind of system works where someone would come into the main meeting, as I said, we'd move them into the preparation room, then they would move into the live room, and then we'd move them out at the end of their session. The main reason we did it this way is that we could have a continuously revolving system. So guests could keep, as after they moved into the live room, then the next session, because it's run all day, the next session's guests would come in to the prep meeting at the same time, and then we would have people in the meeting, in the prep room and in the live room at the same time, constantly revolving as we move between the different sessions. So that kind of, you can see that we've got multiple guests in multiple areas. Preparation is not always possible. With some guests, because they kind of choose what they're looking at. So just to show you
Neve, that's one of the things I really noted about your story, your family story. I noticed it's getting dark where you are, but we can still just see you.
This is performative, you know, where I am right now, it's getting darker. I apologize for that, it wasn't intentional. There's no light here.
So even with as much prep as we could do, sometimes the guests come in from a room with absolutely no light for an evening performance. As much as we tried to prep them, that's sometimes just what happens. So there you go. So that's just a quick overview of everything that we did for the Dementia Fiction Festival conference.
First of all, as someone who builds lots of decks, amazing deck, you know, just really well put together. I mean, it obviously a really well thought out conference as well, but it's great. It's always a pleasure when Richard says, "Oh, I have something else I can show." I'm like, when can we watch another good deck? So anyway, just really well done. One of the things a couple of things I was thinking about there while you were talking about it, but one with it's getting dark. That's what always gets you when you prep people during the day. Like we try to do rehearsals at the same time of day. We don't always get to do that, but at the same time of day as the show, because there's a whole bunch of things that you don't see until you get to that time of day. People, and we had one where a guy looked totally normal, and by the end it did not look normal because of the lack of. We didn't realize like all the light in his room was all sunlight, and that was early on in our growth of that process. Really well done though, Richard. I mean, I think that what's really important for people to see is that with things like ZoomISO, and it's really made a huge difference, that we're capable of putting together shows that really are engaging and really feel much more professional. And I think we definitely have a sensitivity. I get this comment all the time. Well, it's not going to look like Zoom, is it? Like you get this thing like it's not going to look like a Zoom call because everyone's so much bad juju around it. Everyone's been doing it. Everyone's got bad video cameras and everything else. And all we have to do is improve the cameras and then figure out a way to improve the production pipeline a little bit. And I think the reason I think it's so important is that I think that it changes the way we do all conferences as people start to see well-built conferences. Because if you look at what Richard did, if it works, like when it's not just a Zoom call, when it's a broadcast that happens to use Zoom, do you think that a conference like that becomes really hard to reproduce at the same budget? You're not bringing everybody in, and then you have, the sensitivities around carbon footprint, which are only going to get more. There's all kinds of other things that are there that these give an incredible opportunity. And I think a better show when people have lights, I think a better show than a lot of times what we see in person. So we don't have a ton of questions. So if you have questions for Richard, go ahead and raise your digital hand, but we'll go ahead and push these in.
This is just a shot, just very quickly, of kind of what actually the end product looked like, just for people to see. So
look at that.
you know, that's what the conference would look like on the end user side. So we could do that kind of super sourcing, making sure that people looked the best they could, adding different kind of questions and different lower thirds on it, and just adding that level of production to it.
Yeah, it really, it just, I will say that small amount of production added really turns it into a show that people are kind of a little bit more connected to. Let's jump to the questions.
All righty. We've got Douglas Carmichael asking, how did you mix audio for the final broadcast? Did you use the House X32?
Yes, yeah. So the audio was run straight through from, I'll bring it back up again, the main kind of system. Just popped it. I'll pop this in now. There we go. So the audio came in from ZoomISO, then we just outputted it to the Dante Avio cards, and then that sent it into our main mix. So that we don't yet have isolated audio for each participant. Andy is promising it. Every time I mention it, that just puts more pressure on Andy. Sorry, Andy. So, but we were able to balance it in the X32. So if someone was a little bit quieter, we were able to do a little bit of mixing, able to take out a bit of noise from it in the X32 console, and then that would then come back through to another Avio that had the analog output straight into the audio delay box.
Next question.
Jason Fitzgerald in New York City asks, what platform was the audience watching on, and what was your Q&A handling method?
So the audience were watching on YouTube. We thought it would be the most accessible for the audience coming through. We could have delivered to virtually anything because of the openness of using that kind of system. It meant that we were using, we did want to get Meccana up and running for that conference, but we didn't have enough time to deploy it in a way that I felt would be robust enough for us to manage on the same day, because we were still kind of working with it a couple of days before. So we used YouTube, and then we used YouTube comments just as the main thing. But we used a system called Hovercast, which scrapes the comments coming out of YouTube into, it can also script from multiple sources, multiple social media at the same time. And we had one of our team, Jillian, who was then managing those comments coming in, looking for questions, asking for questions, prompting people, moving people through, and then we would then send those through to a prompter style view for the host that was then outputted from the iMac Pro, and then routed through to the Zoom meeting from the just a normal kind of aux out of the ATEM2ME, so they could see the list of questions. It brings up a fair point that we never thought we'd have to prep a panelist to say she couldn't understand why she couldn't scroll the questions coming through on Zoom, because she just wasn't used to the fact that the questions coming through Zoom in that way. So we had to kind of always prep your panelists as much as possible. But there's always some weird questions that always come up.
Yeah. Next question.
Aaron Giancarli from Flagstaff, Arizona asks, can Richard explain the lower third setup in more detail?
Yeah, so we have, yet again, we have the graphical output coming from the iMac Pro and the iMac 27-inch. So the 27-inch is the main one that we built everything in QLab. So we would create the graphics with because we knew each panelist coming in, we knew each person coming in, we would have their name and their title through the general prep, pre-show prep. We could have that all ready to go. We asked each panelist which order they would speak in. So then whenever they came in, all we would have to do is start the system, start the session, and then in order as they start to speak, start to introduce what they would be. That's a kind of shot of what it actually looks like. So we would be able to deliver this straight when it was needed for each specific person just coming out of QLab. So it would be keyed over. I'm pretty sure we used the Luma key for this one. We might use the Chroma. I can't remember off the top of my head. And we tried to design it with we didn't design the branding of this festival, but we matched the branding as much as we could in every layer of graphics that we did. So we took their main printout, and then we kind of matched every single thing we did. Emma on our team, it's very talented, managed to kind of within a couple of days, because they had their press very late, match everything to their kind of main printed program.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I see you use Dante Avio adapters to get out of one of the machines. Why was that?
In the minis, in particular, they don't use DVS just yet. So we're using the Avios as a bit of a workaround. We use DVS on the main machines, the iMac Pro and the 27-inch. But the minis, the M1s don't have DVS support just yet. So the Avios are a pretty good workaround, but they only let 2 out and 2 in. But we have the Avio on the other end, the analog output, which is really fantastic. So it allows us to bring audio through that entire system straight into the RAIN for the embed into the output.
Next question.
Mickey Macador in the Philippines asks, did you have a program monitor and a comms feed in the prep room?
So we didn't have a comms feed. We had an actual employee in the room with them at all times. So we had a comms feed to our employee, but we didn't have them. We would have one of the nice things about Zoom is that it obviously mix minuses the feed that you're sending out. So I can't hear myself right now because it's mix minusing that. So it means that the main mini that was set up, we could talk into it with no need to have to actually do any adjusting on our end, other than we could talk into that and talk to all the participants who are live in that session at any time without having to hear that on the program feed. So that's sort of how we talk to people once they came into the live room. If there were any problems, we could actually talk to them physically. We didn't do that because it would normally, with anyone who's not spent any length of time doing broadcast, it would throw them off completely during an actual live show. But it meant that we could have an emergency backup to talk to them if we really needed to. But in the prep room, it was just set up with an actual employee being able to talk them through each stage, and then we had them on comms with us over Unity.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Visberg, Germany. Did you own all the gear or did you have to rent some of it?
Because we run our own venue, I have a propensity for purchase over rent. Especially if I know I'm going to use it over multiple different events. So it depends upon how many events we have coming in, but everything within this show was purchased.
Next question.
Jason Beisch in Albuquerque, New Mexico asks, why did you need the rack-mounted frame delay? Was the X32's built-in delay insufficient?
It's not insufficient, but it allows us to, the reason we bought the RAIN is to dial in the delay with as much accuracy as we can, but also to do it at an endpoint before it goes out rather than doing it inside the X32. I'm not a massive fan of doing delay inside the console, but at the same time, the advantage of the RAIN is that we could change frame rates at the click of a button without having to do much recalculation. So we can easily change the frame rate and the delay based upon that frame rate with a couple of clicks on the RAIN itself.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Winsberg, Germany asks, what was the overall budget for the production?
Their budget was underneath £5,000. I won't give any specifics because it's not personally my information necessarily. But for 2 days it was underneath £5,000.
It's amazing. Next question.
Juan C. Robles in Mexico. How much time did it take for the preparation until the event?
It's an interesting question. I over-prepare, especially when we're deploying things that we haven't been using for years. So I see these events, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing over the last year and a half, I always caveat it with the idea that I didn't hear the word ATEM until I joined office hours a year and a half ago. So everything's brand new. ZoomISO we only started using within the last 6 months. So every single event that we do is a chance for us to learn something more and dig into it. And because we're deploying something, not necessarily in beta, not necessarily, but not even that it's in beta for us, but it's a chance for us to learn and push things as far as we go. So we tend to over prepare to a huge degree. So we spend weeks and weeks and weeks testing the system. In actually the months ahead of this event, I was in After Hours a lot with ZoomISO doing the exact show. So After Hours as always, thank you very much. So we were screen scraping things, we're testing it, we're checking frame rates. I would have if there was a problem, Andy was incredibly giving that I could actually go to him or go to the Slack channel and work out what was happening with certain things. We did have one weird tech thing happen where, and it seems to be with Siphon. By the end, about 6 hours into each day, the frame rate would judder unless we had Siphon in the foreground on the minis. I haven't seen that in anything else except for really long events. So that was a very odd thing. We couldn't work it out first time. We moved over to our backup mini first of all as a solution. We thought it was a problem with that mini or the bandwidth or something on that computer. But the solution ended up, we just foregrounded Black Siphon and it worked smoothly every time.
I will say it really speaks to you and your team to be taking all of this stuff on and doing what it takes to actually get it done. I mean, you're really breaking new ground, and it's not everyone does that. A lot of people are like, let's figure out let's figure out how to do it safely, or let's figure out how to do the easy thing or other things, and you're not doing any of those things. It's really amazing. Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin. How do you send the people from the prep room to the main room?
Because it's all within one meeting, it was just really simply moving them we assigned them to a specific breakout room and then reassigned them to a different breakout room. So it's quite simple. It was one of the benefits of doing it within one meeting. I mean, it did make me nervous that our entire system for a show was run off one meeting, but we had enough internet backups that I felt it was, and we had enough other machines in the meeting that even if one machine crashed, we would have backups. Even the fact that we had 2 minis inside the main session, the main live session, meant that if one mini crashed, then we wouldn't lose the entire show.
I will say that after talking, when Grant brought it up I won't say years ago, but months ago, about how he uses the breakout rooms, and we started doing something similar to what Richard does, it just changes how you do shows. Like, it is so powerful to use those breakout rooms when you have that room. And so, like, for us, we take it where we have a person sitting in the main room when they come in. Hi, how's it going? Are you ready? And we've had ones where we do things where there's different speakers sets of people sometimes who can't interact with each other. So we have they get their own rooms that they get put into to do that. We had one where we were doing like a junket, and we brought the artist to each room, so that you can go the other direction as well. But we have a general room where we bring everybody in and let them hang out together, and we pull them in and do hair and makeup, digital hair and makeup, which means we just make sure everything's looking good and everything else one at a time. When they go through that, after they go through that we put them into another green room. They're now all hair and makeup's done. They're all ready to go, and they sit there, and then we pull them into what they need to do. And then when they're done, we put them back in a green room where they can see the show kind of playing in a low. And what we found is that they love hanging out with each other. I mean, part of the value of being a speaker is hanging out with the other speakers. And that's one of the big things that got lost when we got rid of physical events, is the speakers don't get to hang out with each other, and talk. And so giving them an ability to be in a group and talk to each other afterwards, not with everybody else, but in their own, kind of like the speaker room, having these kind of congregating areas for them has become super powerful. Like, we have to do it that way now, because it really helps. Next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia asks, how much prep time did you have with each panelist to help them with their environment and technical setup? What's the best way that you found to coach people who are not technically savvy?
It depends a little bit upon the event. So within this one, we brought in everyone at least an hour beforehand. So and we did get a fair amount of pushback, even from a couple of academics, upon how early. And an hour is not a lot of time, but how early we asked them to arrive. So they would come in about an hour ahead, and then each person would be prepped together as a group. So it allowed us to kind of not necessarily play them off each other, but at least talk to them and allow them to talk to each other and see why we wanted to change one thing versus another thing. And then we would move them into the control room, and then the control room would repeat a lot of the checks and add on a couple of other final checks, as well as then give them countdowns and so forth. Someone asked earlier on, which I realized I didn't quite answer, we didn't pump the program feed into either of the rooms. Just for us, it wasn't a necessary thing. We could have done it, but we've decided it wasn't necessary. It would be too distracting for this specific type of panel. What we did do is we showed them what it would look like beforehand so that they would get a sense of what they were looking like, and then we would just only send them back the questions or the slides that they were using. We also had multiple days beforehand where we had asked the specific person to come in at a specific time, and we also did round kind of open days, as mentioned. We would say, okay, Tuesday on this day before the conference, we are going to have a Zoom room open the entire day from these hours, and you can join us at that time, any time that suits you, and we'll be there to talk you through your setup. So we called it the green room, and that way they could just come in and test it. We've used that for other conferences where we would have, so Imagine Festival we did last year where everything was run through webinar and meeting. All the way through the week-long festival, we would also have another room available called the Green Room that they would be able to come into all the way through the festival. That one was done slightly more ad hoc because it's about 100 different participants across the year, and there was nowhere, sorry, across the week, and there was no way we would have the budget to individually check every single one. And having said that, there would be a fair amount of resistance to having that come in and do checks from some groups. So it was about spending as much time as we could with them within the time we would have, but also opening up as many avenues where they could come in and freely elect to check. And a fair number of them did, and some of them didn't, including the person I showed at the end, who I think she changed location just before the event as well. She had to go to her parents' house or another house, in fairness, and that didn't. I'm still baffled where she goes into a room that doesn't have light for an evening gig online, but that's just what happened.
Next question.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany asks, how much of what you did was on the requirement list of the customer? What did you do without telling the customer to positively surprise it?
I mean, we could have probably suggested any delivery method, and we've done it to a degree that not many other people could have done it to within our sphere. So we could have delivered it really nicely on a Zoom meeting and had other ways of doing the graphical play, other ways of doing it. So the entire ZoomISO system with the way that we played it out would have been a massive surprise. And the conference, as I said at the beginning, was really, really happy. They're a really nice bunch because they're a mixture between artists and academics. They get the aesthetic nature of what we're doing with making it more of a broadcast, and they're getting the interaction nature of why they make it online and online only. I still think if we do this for them next year, they might still want a physical audience for some of it, but there is a slow growing adoption of kind of online only and why it's benefiting them. So there's a huge amount that we did in the background, like the amount of backups we put in place, the amount of the different redundancies, the different quality levels. Even lower thirds would be a surprise to them. Super sources would be a complete surprise to them. Different types of play out for video, where someone wanted to play out a specific type of video or a specific clip. Us editing that, pre-prepping it, making sure the audio checking, double checking levels, all those kind of things would have been a slight surprise, I think, to the client, but a welcome one.
And this is what Richard's doing, what Hosmic's doing, what other people are doing here. This is the key to these online events becoming more popular and a standard is by taking ZoomISO and other things like this and creating real shows out of them, not just a collection. What most people do in Zoom is the equivalent of going into a hotel room, getting the hotel projector and having the podium and just kind of, running it yourself. I mean, and that's how people start. I mean, and I've gone to lots of those, and they are a lot of government and academic, things. There's not really an MC. They just kind of, people stand up, okay, who am I next? And they do their thing. But when we start to put a little shine on it, put a little sheen across what we're doing, people get excited about going, and they get excited about their brand being connected to it. And I think that it's so important. It's one of the reasons I wanted Richard to come and show this. Is just so important for us to look at how do we add a little. And what you're seeing is not a lot of hardware that we couldn't get, especially when you compare to the commitment that's required to do it in a physical environment. And then once you have this, you're not loading it in, you're not shipping it all over the world. You can actually have this equipment and make it work. Yeah, it's really, really great. Next question.
Jeff Keatley in Texas asks, would you ever like to do all of this in the cloud instead of hardware on-prem?
I would definitely like to try it. It's just not an area that I'm as familiar with. But having said that, as I mentioned, I wasn't familiar with a lot of these things a year and a half ago. So there's absolutely no resistance to it. And so Jeff, you cunning fellow, I will be in contact as always.
And and one thing I would suggest for people who want to see some of that as well, definitely contact Jeff. But also the Mobley, so Conversations with Tony Mobley is all in the cloud, and so it's something that now that my schedule's opening up a little bit, I'm hoping to volunteer a little bit myself because I don't know it well enough to do it in the cloud. I want to get my head around it. So I think that it's really worth checking out. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Mickey Makachor in the Philippines asks, how were the talent IFB feeds created? Where was the interrupt ducking happening?
Because of the way we deployed this specific system, there was no IFB other than Zoom. So we were able to talk in the Zoom, as I mentioned before, and get through to the talent if we needed to in case of emergency. But otherwise, we weren't doing any massive kind of other special systems, including for the people in studio. It's just a choice earlier on I made that to kind of make it as simple as possible for the artists and participants.
Next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia asks, when moving from the prep room to the main room, do you move the next speaker in while the speaker before is presenting or after? How do you cue the next presenter when they start presenting?
These were done more for panels in this kind of instance. So it was less about queuing presenters and more about we were moving groups of people. Originally, this was the final iteration of something I was designing for a while. And one of the iterations was that the panelists would never have to move at all. They would be in a breakout room and then we would move the ZoomISO to whichever room, or would have the two minis in two different rooms, and then we would change the feeds so they could come into the room and then stay in that room for the entire show. Ultimately, I decided it was more stable for us to move the panelists than keep moving ZoomISO, and also it would allow us to have the backup as well of the two minis in the system. Within the sessions themselves, it was pre-planned who would speak. So the hardest session for us was where there were two speakers with two presentations. So we then would have to do the physical changeover and change. They had internet clicker, so it meant that the system was available to them from the beginning, and we would then change the slides over in the background, and then they would be able to move on. That was the tightest changeover. But in terms of when they were speaking, it was a set order, and then it would be an open round panel discussion.
And when you said internet clicker, what did you mean there?
So Internet Clicker is a software option for controlling Keynote or PowerPoint or anything else. I think it can actually control PDFs and other such things. So it is just if you Google Internet Clicker, you will get it. It means that we can give a specific code to a person on the other end. They can control it on their phone or on iPad or on a computer at the same time and be able to connect into our computer here and just move it fast back and forth. It's been mentioned a number of times. This is the first time I got to properly deploy it for a show, and it worked really well for us.
So you found it was stable?
I did, yeah.
That's great. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, how much of this event could have been operated remotely?
I think a fair amount of it. I mean, if you take it from the constituent parts, so we have our artist or participant preparation, that can be remote because it's just one of our team in a Zoom room with them. You think of the control, so that we know that the items can be controlled remotely. We know that the producer can be in room or again on Zoom remotely. Our question and answer system was controlled by a team member in the building, but again, that can be controlled remotely because it was all done through a web interface. And then all the panelists are obviously remote, bar one or two studio guests. So a vast amount of it can be pushed remote.
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asked, did you record the Zoom locally or in the cloud?
We recorded the main output from the Zoom, so that was one of the kind of briefs, was that they wanted the videos from each one. So we would record to a couple of hyperdecks for backup, and then we would easily be able to trim and top and tail the recordings, and then or go in and kind of edit out any massive problems and immediately upload them to YouTube by the end of the day.
Next question.
Andre Doyle in Berlin asks, which machine was the host and why that specific machine?
I'm trying to remember back actually which one we made the host. I'm pretty sure we made the for ease of access, we made the prep room machine the host, or we made the one that was in the main meeting at the entire time. One of the problems with Zoom is that once you go into a breakout room, you can't make anything a co-host. So I think we might have kept the mini that was running, that was sat with OBS in the main, outside in the kind of main section where no one was. I think we kept that one the main host, or we had the iMac 21 inch, which was in the prep room, the host. The reasons are Emma, who was on the prep room side of things, she would be the most free staff member to do something in an emergency. So she could come out, move things around, being instructed over comms if there was a problem. Whereas the main control room, which is next door to me now, which is why I'm pointing that way, we would be in the middle of doing the show, so we wouldn't have the mental bandwidth to kind of go out in an emergency. It wasn't done for a technical reason other than that weird Zoom thing where once you're in a breakout room, you can't really do anything to anyone.
Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota asks, was Isadora used?
No, unfortunately not.
And is that mostly just you just haven't gotten into it yet?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, it's definitely on my list of things to look at.
We've gone with Isadora. We've gone from not knowing what it is to you have to explain why it wasn't incorporated into the system. So it's next question.
Idris Haggy in Fairfax, Virginia asks, how do you manage updates and upgrades of Mac OS? Do you use backup to restore Mac Mini to previous working state?
We usually have most machines on a version past. I think everything that we have is actually now on Big Sur, so for consistency. But usually we're as far back as we can do without being obsolete. And then not many machines are necessarily backed up because they all have the exact same instance of everything. It's very easy just to reset them up, apart from a couple of specific machines which are then backed up through Time Machine and other kind of backup options.
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asks, what possibilities of influencing the look would you have lost if you use 5 laptops instead of ZoomISO?
I think it's less about the look, because as I said at the beginning, we could have done that. It's just the hardware involved that's an increase in the number of machines that are coming in and failure points. Whereas with ZoomISO, we have one machine doing 4 1080p outputs and another machine there ready to do another 4 1080p outputs if we needed, or a higher number of 720p outputs. So it's less about the look and more about the stability as well as the versatility of that. So we're reducing the amount of hardware. We've certainly done shows in the past where it's every machine is a person going in via HDMI or into SDI into the switcher. But when ZoomISO was introduced, it just made much more sense to start to reduce the amount of hardware so we could do more with then the same available hardware.
For some of our shows, we still use bringing everybody in on an ISO because it gives us other controls that we want. But I will say that also in addition to what Richard just said, just the interactivity, the lower latency makes a big difference of not pulling people in and because you're doubling up their latency by bringing them in one at a time. So that's another big advantage of ISO. Next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia asks, what considerations were taken when you decided to use Blackmagic switchers instead of software switchers like vMix?
Well, we run a Mac mostly house, so immediately we don't have vMix as an option. We could have the reason for the item switcher originally say when we started building the system, part of the reason for this deployment is that we know it really well now and we have it. So that's, it integrates with ZoomISO really well. We don't have to worry about NDI. We cable directly from one thing to the other. So it's really clear, really clean, exactly where we know where to go. It can go up to 4K if we want to. It can go up to really nice, stable. But I think in answer to the question, I don't know PHMX as well as I know what we've got. So it's just not something that necessarily I would have deployed just for this. But as Jeff mentioned, it can be done in the cloud. It can be done in many different ways. This is just the way I did this show with what we have available.
Next question.
Gabriel Ung in Malaysia asks, what would you have done differently or better after this successful event?
You always want more time to prep people. We couldn't have sent people kits and things like that. It just wasn't within the budget. I think a better question and answer system would have been the best thing. If we had Meccana or something similar, that would have been fantastic, because even with YouTube being quite accessible, it's interesting. I'll probably use a different example. The recent Belfast shows that we've done for office hours, when we started using Meccana for those, we started to see an immediate increase in the amount of actual quality and questions that came through from the audience to the talent. And having that kind of integrated system allows for a much higher level of engagement. You just don't get the same engagement using just only a chat where we then choose which ones are questions or which ones aren't. It just doesn't work in the same way. So that was my major disappointment, is that we didn't get as many questions and interactivity as I felt was available to us if we had used a different system.
There's an informality, I think, to chat when it's all mixed in that just makes it really hard to get thoughtful questions, especially in YouTube. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, could you have done this show with a Zoom room with NDI and not ZoomISO?
Yes. We're not set up for NDI as the current system. In the same way, we don't have the embedders to go into data, and we don't have we have the internet infrastructure for it, but we're not built in that way at the moment. But because I built it with ZoomISO, I built the current system with ZoomISO in mind, because it fitted really nicely with what we already had, and it had a huge amount of stability and versatility options available. But I'm sure you can do it.
Next question.
James Hutchinson in Dublin, Ireland asks, can ZoomISO be used in breakout rooms and the main room at the same time?
Yes and no. So you can't. It's where the machine is. So obviously, I can't be on this machine where I am right now in a breakout room and in the main meeting, but you can have two computers in two different parts of the same meeting, and then with two instances of ZoomISO. So it's where the host computer is, not necessarily where ZoomISO is.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, did you use Meccana as the question answering system?
I wish.
There we go. Next question.
William Coleman in Cushenden, North Ireland. Do you do tours? Because I'd love to come for a look around.
Thanks, William. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can hit us up in the email. It's Cushenden. I'll say for I might even be pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's Cushenden, I believe, for William. And yes, you're welcome to come down. He's slightly further north than we are right now. If anyone's interested in
so he's in Northern Ireland.
He's in Northern Ireland, yeah. He's in the north coast of Northern Ireland, sort of the northeast coast.
Sounds amazing. Next question.
Andy Dolph in Durham, North Hampshire. Could you talk more about what you were using OBS for on the main and green room Zooms?
Really just information. So because we don't have a huge amount of staff, it's not a huge budget, we would have the main meeting with OBS would just have a card there saying welcome. Please be aware that the attendant in the meeting will move you to a breakout room. We can't talk to you via audio, but we will talk to you via chat here. Little kind of snippets of information, and then other kind of things in the same in the prep room. Just little bits of information done via virtual cam. So we just made cards that looked exactly like the branding for the show. In fact, I think you can probably see it in one of the. You can just about see it in the shot here, which is just in the center. You can see just here kind of what it looks like, as well as here. These are just simple cards with simple bit of information with a bit of branding as well, just to keep it all consistent, so people felt welcomed in the right way and in a certain way.
Next question.
Idris Haggy in Fairfax, Virginia. How do you manage backups of those Macs? Do you keep Mac OS backups handy just in case? And how do you manage upgrading to Mac OS and other software and making sure that they do not break the show?
For show purposes, the backup is another machine. In our instance, it's not a backup, a backup saved. So if we have a problem, we would move it, like in a show, we would just move to a completely different machine. So if we had to and we lost both those minis, we could then easily unplug ZoomISO and move it to another computer if we really had to, or have more computers. For kind of upgrading, we usually just be very careful and we look for where the bugs are. I've made that mistake as many times as probably others have about upgrading too soon, and just do it very carefully and with knowledge.
Next question.
Mickey Makachor in the Philippines asks, how was the AV sync between the multiple Siphon and deck link feeds and between the multiple ZoomISO machines with Dante?
Thankfully, within what most of the panels ended up being is that we didn't have to necessarily match the two Zooms to each other, the two ZoomISOs to each other. There was one instance, and essentially it was all done because it's all coming from the main, all the audio is coming from the main ZoomISO, not the backup ZoomISO. Then it was just matched as well as we could to the overall room, and then matched only in the rain. So we didn't have Mickey's complete skills at matching audio as specifically as he can. I've been over the last couple of weeks, I've been absolutely amazed by Mickey's ability to dial in audio delay to like the 100th of the millisecond. Mickey, I mean, fair play.
Next question.
Andre Dole in Berlin asks, Alex, why and how do you double up the latency when bringing up panelists via individual machines compared to ISO?
So what happens is that you have what we call the reflector that is getting everybody in the cloud, and everyone's talking, and they all go into that reflector and all come back to each other, and that takes a certain amount of time. So just getting to that back. Now, if we bring them into individual machines, what happens is they go up to the reflector, they come down. When they get back to us, we then create a show, but we then send them a feed back to the reflector, and then it comes back to them. So that's 2 times that it has to go for everyone to see it and hear it. Now, on our end, we have them and we're all cutting. It doesn't change how they're getting to us, but it changes how they hear and see everything on the way back. And so the result of that is that it doubles up the amount of time between when they're talking to each other. Now, people who get used to it, like for instance, everything on Twit that you might see is all done that way. But you'll see every once in a while people talk over each other. If we're not conscious of it, there is this 400 millisecond delay between us because there's 2 200s that are kind of being stacked up. So it is much faster. And it feels different. I'll tell you that as you move up the food chain, so Zoom sits at about 220 milliseconds, from one person to the next. When you use something like fiber, like the switch, and you're down to 25 or 50, it just feels like you're there, and so it changes the way you interact, and it makes the show better. And so while we do it, because some stuff, it's really the isolated audio for us is the big thing that is holding us back from switching completely to this different system, because we have enough machines now that if we got ZoomISO working on PCs and we could take in just an enormous number of people at one time if this got sorted out. But right now, Zoom isolated audio is the reason we still do it primarily. But that's why it doubles up as a double leg. Next question.
The next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Did you encounter any reliability issues with the Blackmagic design gear?
No, not in this show. We have had problems recently with the Hyperdeck being slightly older 4K studio Hyperdeck being unresponsive after being on for a wee while. So I'm currently investigating why that is. But we've had a couple of problems with that Hyperdeck a few times, but nothing mission critical that we've seen so far. And again, the time frame of these shows where we're in at 8 a.m. setting up and then running until 10 p.m. at night, and we had nothing.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, have you thought of integrating plug-in processing to the Dante network using either Live Professor or Wave Sound Grid Bridge and server?
I can't say I haven't, but I'm not an audio engineer. I would default to Martin Price, who's our building engineer, or someone else for that kind of thing. It's definitely not within my wheelhouse.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, have you ever thought about upgrading your consoles to an A&H SQ series, for example, or D-Live? I could see the Accidental playing a role as a lab for equipment vendors and also training the next generation of production professionals.
I did look at the D-Live system a couple of years back, and it looked absolutely awesome, and it certainly still does. I think the decisions we've made based upon cost, we're still happy with. I think I would go in a slightly different direction at this stage, into more of a Yamaha direction if I had the budget than the D-Live. But when we first started out, all of our mixers were Allen Heath, and as we developed and we've gone further, the X32 consoles and rack, I'm sure one of the reasons why we bought it is its propensity for being mentioned and being people who know how to use it on office hours. But at the same time, its costs to delivery kind of factor. I mean, it's pretty accessible. Even I can use it. I'll refer you back to the previous question. Even I can use it. But I can see us going in the direction of Midas or QL1 or something like that in the future, rather than necessarily Allen Heath. Having said that, if anyone wants to lend us one or otherwise, I certainly wouldn't say no.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, are you running your Dante traffic on the same network as other traffic, or a separate network, or VLAN?
It's an entirely separate network. So it runs through its own switch. That switch isn't connected into the other building infrastructure. It does its own thing and nothing else apart from Dante. That's partially because when we first started using Dante last year, the year before, I think it was last year now. It's getting hard to tell which years these things are now with the pandemic. The first time we started using Dante, we used it on our Ubiquity system. As much as the others have had absolutely no problem, we did. Like the first time we went to deploy it for an actual show, it crashed the entire network, and that's bound to be just how we had it configured because we're brand new to using it. But from that and from discussions with people who knew what they were doing on office hours, we decided just to move it to I decided to move it to its entirely own network, which is how we've then kept it, and it's been absolutely stable ever since.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, could you have integrated a real-time translation engine to make the event more globally inclusive?
Well, technically, because we used it on YouTube, they have a real-time translation system already built into it. It's not my my knowledge to know how to build that in, but I'm absolutely sure that we could. What's more likely we would do is have a actual person in the building doing sign language or something close to that rather than necessarily text translation. That would be our first port of call, where they would have a feed from the program feed, and we would just literally shoot them and key them over, or do an entirely separate feed that has sign language.
Next question.
Mickey Makachor in the Philippines asks, why the open vessel of beverage on the desk?
Yeah, well spotted, Mickey. I like the tears in the question as well. It's, as you can see by this photo, it's far away from me. It's a long way away. It's not going to be hit, but yes, I shouldn't have had an open top beverage. You can see beside me, I've got a water bottle, which is closed top. So yes, yeah, be careful with your beverages.
We've had lots of signs and oftentimes in control rooms of like, no open beverages, no open beverages. Yeah, exactly. It's the scariest thing. I will say I love how the Mac Minis are attached to the wall. Is that something you can buy, or is that something you created?
No, that's something you can buy. So there's under the desk where I am right now is one of those mounts as well, and so I've got one of the minis mounted underneath my desk at the moment for telestration and stuff. So no, those ones they're just off Amazon. I think they're more security security connections than anything else.
That's great.
Pivot Mounts, I think, is the company.
Nice. Next question.
And our final question for the day is from Douglas Carmichael. Do you think that adding too much slickness to an event affects the community building role that, from what I've seen, the Accidental has created for the Belfast area?
I don't think so. I mean, it's an interesting question. Is when you move it to broadcasty, does it become alienating for people coming into it? I don't think so. I think the slicker and smoother you can make something, the more people will want to get involved. We're really used to watching. Years ago when I first started directing, we would start to take conventions from, and it's like theater directing, we'd take conventions from TV and movies because people were so used to those conventions that anything moving outside of that, especially in pacing, it would become really strange for people. So having a half an hour set change, no. Having a set change that you can, having a set change where it's not done really smoothly with lights and sound, that's done very slickly. It pushes the audience back, doesn't allow them to come in. It immediately removes them from the world of what you're performing or what you're showing. So it's sort of the same for these productions. We want them to be smooth. It doesn't have to be slick. It's just smooth and interactive. And those are the two things we try and push down. The slickness comes from just making it look as interesting and graphically appealing and smooth, pacing smooth as possible.
I think it always has to be, function over form. That there are reasons for those, and let you focus and see what you need to see, and not. I think people do get caught up with shows where they put too much into it. But I think you guys found the right balance. Richard, thank you so much. That was such an incredible presentation. I mean, just incredible knowledge from on the ground, incredible presentation. Richard will be speaking next week. No, I'm just kidding. No, just like I'd give you your every Monday if you wanted it. Like, here's what we did in this one piece here. So anyway, just we'd run poor Richard into the ground. I know how much, as someone who builds keynote slides, I was like, that's a lot of work. Like Richard put a lot into that. I think people, beyond learning about this, you should go back and look at that keynote. So many great things. Just the way the transitions work, the magic moves, the bringing out the content piece by piece is also a great thing to look at. Something we can learn from Richard beyond the behind the scenes. So just fantastic work, Richard. Thank you so much. Yeah, really well done. And thank you for the generosity of letting us play in your sandbox every week or every other week. It's really made a huge difference. Thanks to our producers for all the great questions. I mean, I've gotten to the point where all I want to know is when I want to figure something out or I want to bring somebody in, I just want to do it in the second hour. I don't want it because all those questions came in from all over the world of people asking things that I wouldn't have thought of all those questions. I wouldn't have thought, if I had that conversation with Richard for an hour, I would not have learned as much as I learned in this second hour about what he did, because all these people are looking from different directions and asking all these great questions. Douglas may have learned as much, but I think he might have been able to keep up. But for most of us, we wouldn't have been able to absorb as much because, and I just think it's such a powerful forum for us to do that. So anyway, so really, really great work from the producers, asking those great questions, and then of course thank you to the panelists who show up here and contribute back into the community. I really, really appreciate the work that you do and the commitment. It's a couple hours in a day that we've got lots of other things, and it really makes a huge difference for the community and for this all to work. So thank you very much. And now we're going to jump into after hours and continue the conversation in a slightly less formal way. All right. Thanks, everybody.